I never knew my mother. It was only 8 months old when she died. Well, when she was murdered. I don't know much else about it. In fact, I didn't even know she was murdered until 2 years ago, when I was 15. You see, my dad doesn't like to talk about her at all, so he never discussed why she was no longer with us. I've seen photos of her, and so I know what she looks like, but I wasn't told much about her. I always thought that she died of a sickness or maybe in a freak accident, so I was very surprised when I found out that she had been murdered. I wish that my father would talk more about it though, because I want to know how it happened. I've heard a few rumours at school about how she died. I overheard one kid say that she was kidnapped and held for ransom before being killed when my dad didn't pay. Another kid told me that she was decapitated and her head was never found. So I really don't know what to believe, and I couldn't ask my dad to fill in the details. Ever since I found out about my mother's fate, however, I've become overtly interested in true crime, and I especially enjoy learning about unsolved mysteries. That's how I found out about the strange museum that suddenly appeared in my town. My friend Ellie had first told me about it. "Have you seen that museum that opened in the old library?" she asked me one day at lunchtime. I replied that I hadn't seen it, and that I didn't know anything about it, so she went on to explain what it was. I heard that it is a museum that is all about famous murder cases, and has a lot of exhibits that feature real crime scene photos, and even a few items that were taken from murder sites, she explained. "I'm going there on Saturday. Did you want to come?" I thought about it for a moment, but then remembered that I had planned to spend the day with Dad, so I had to tell her that I couldn't make it, which she seemed disappointed about. I thought about this museum for the rest of the school day. I began to wonder what crimes would have exhibits. Maybe they'll have an exhibit for my mum, I thought. Maybe I could find out more about her murder. I thought long and hard about whether or not I should try and go to the museum, and finally, I decided that I would go on Sunday. My dad was going out of town that day for work, so it was the perfect time to go. I spent the rest of the week leading up to Sunday both excited and nervous. I was excited because I knew that I would find the museum very interesting, but nervous because I didn't know exactly what to expect. When Sunday finally rolled around, I was more excited than nervous. My dad left early on Sunday morning, so I knew I had most of the day to explore the mysterious museum without him seeing me there. I got up at around 8:30 and got dressed and ready for my day. I then walked across town to where the library used to be. I soon arrived and saw that instead of the sign that used to read Town Library, there was now a sign that was freshly painted with the words, "The Murder Museum." There were already a couple of people in the line when I arrived, so I stood behind them and waited my turn to enter the museum. In front of me was a large man that had a small tattoo of a bird on his cheek. He appeared to also be by himself, and it looked like he was quite excited to go in. He made it to the front of the line and bought a ticket and entered through the front door. It was now my turn, so I walked up to the little booth that had been set up, and I approached the younger man sitting inside the booth. The man selling the tickets was around 25, and he had long black hair and a large smile that was filled with crooked yellow teeth. "Ticket for one, please," I said to the young man, and handed over a $10 note that I'd gotten from my part-time job. The man took my money without saying anything and handed me a small paper ticket that read, "Admit 1." He then pointed me to the direction of the front door and said, "Enter at your own risk." I walked over to the main door and pushed it open and stepped inside, not knowing what to expect. What I found inside was mostly old newspaper articles of old murders and old fading photos of what appeared to be crime scenes. They were all in glass displays, and the displays lined up in a row that led to another door. I looked through each newspaper articles, searching for any mention of my mother. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything about her. Not even a mention of her name was present in any of the articles. I was disappointed, but I still found it fascinating about all of the true crimes that had been committed. I read about Kevin Fuller, the killer who would hide his victims' bodies inside his own private jet, and I read about Terry Sturt, the man who murdered both of his closest friends. I probably spent an hour or so walking down the long line of displays that featured the newspaper articles. I finally made it to the end of the row of newspaper cuttings and found myself standing in front of a small black door. It was shut, but I had no other way but to go through it. I opened the door, which creaked as I opened it, and I stepped through into the next room. This room had a lot more interesting items. There were displays of old clothing that, according to the small plaques underneath displays, were clothes that the victims were wearing when they were killed. There were also a few murder weapons that were in the small glass cases. There were a few knives, a couple handguns, even a machete that apparently were used in various murders. I did find this interesting, but I found myself becoming a little overwhelmed. Thinking about all of the victims got me thinking about my own mother. I didn't spend too long in this room because I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. I moved through the large number of display cases, trying to avoid looking at what was contained inside. And I moved to another door. This one was a bit larger than the previous one, and it was painted a dark red colour. I opened the door and stepped into the next room, worried about what I might find. I walked in, and the first thing I noticed was the large glass case that stood in front of me. Inside was a small car, a Volkswagen Golf, I think it was. I quickly read that this car was used to lure victims, and then they would be killed inside of the car. I felt chills run down my spine as I learned that people were killed inside of the car that I was currently looking at. I turned away from the car, and that's when I saw it. The shrunken head, sitting in a small glass case across the other side of the room. I had heard of shrunken heads before, and I'd seen a few photos of them, but I'd never seen one in real life. I excitedly walked over to it and had a look at the small, shriveled head that was staring back at me. I looked at the head and had a sudden sense that I recognized the head. I looked closer, and even though the head was a lot smaller than usual and it was shriveled and it was hard to make out any facial features, I could still tell exactly who this used to be. It was Ellie, my friend from school, who told me about the museum. I knew that she had to come here yesterday, and I hadn't spoken to her since, and I suddenly knew that something terrible had happened. I stood there frozen for a minute, not knowing what to do. What had happened to Ellie yesterday at this museum? Could the same thing happen to me? I didn't even want to think about it. All I knew was I had to get out of here. I began to run back the way I came and tried to open the dark red coloured door that I had entered through. It was locked from this side. It was only open to people coming through, but you couldn't go back through it once you'd already entered. All I could do was keep on going through the museum. No one else was around. I hadn't seen anyone for quite a while, which was strange because there were definitely people lining up behind me. I knew that I had to continue, so I ran to the next door that was on the other side of the room, past the shrunken head. I didn't look at it as I ran past. I made it to the next door, a small green door. I opened it and went through. I could see that this room was empty, apart from rows of pots, all sitting on top of small portable gas stoves. I cautiously approached the first pot and had a look inside. I just had to know what was in there, and once I knew, I really wish I hadn't. Inside the pot, looking back at me, was another head that was boiling inside of the pot. I could already see that this head was slightly smaller than when I had last seen this. It was the small bird tattoo on the head's face that made me realise who I was looking at. I knew that this man entered before me, and somehow His head was now getting boiled inside a pot, getting shrunk inside of a pot. Suddenly, there was a noise behind me, and I saw a masked man walk out of a door that was hidden in the corner of this room. He was heading straight towards me, and he was holding a machete. I knew that it was now my turn to become just a head, just a shrunken head. I felt adrenaline racing through my body, and I began to sprint in the opposite direction of the man who was approaching me. I managed to run to the other side end of the room, past the row of boiling pots. I saw that there was a small door on this side of the room. I managed to reach it, and I looked back and saw that the man with the machete was now gaining on me. He was not far from reaching me now. I turned the doorknob, and luckily it opened. I felt sunlight hit my face. I was now outside. I was out the back of the library. I kept running, trying to get back to the front of the library and then as far away as possible. I was still expecting the door I'd come through to swing open and the masked man to run out, but it never did. I managed to navigate my way back to the front of the library, and once I was back to the front, I saw that there was no lineup of people waiting to enter. I probably wouldn't have stopped to warn them, even if there was a lineup. I knew that I needed to get as far away from this place as possible, and so that's exactly what I did. I did go to the police about what I experienced, and they rushed down to the museum, just in case what I was saying was true. When the police arrived, the library was empty. Everything was gone. The newspaper cuttings, the weapons, the car, and the shrunken head. I don't know where they all went, but all I know is that they've left my town. Ellie is still classed as missing, and the police say that no one knows what happened to her. But I do. I know what happened. I'm not really sure if this is the right place to post this, but I think that it's worth sharing. I spent the last 2 days thinking about it, worrying about it, and I just need to share what I found, and hopefully someone might know more about it. It all started when I was looking at reviews on the internet for my local hospital, as I'm going there in a few days for a small procedure. I just wanted to make sure that the doctors there are reliable and good at what they do. Anyways, as I was scrolling through the reviews, I came across one that, for some reason, caught my attention. I've attached the review here, but have changed or removed any names and locations for privacy reasons. 5-star. Staff were very friendly and my procedure was successful. 14th of the 5th, 2017. I visited the South Hill Community Hospital 6 weeks ago for a procedure on my eyes, cataract. The staff there were very kind and looked after my every need before I went into surgery. They made sure that I was comfortable and clear on what the operation would entail and what to expect afterwards. When it came time for my operation to start, I was taken through by a lovely nurse. I think her name was Redacted, that made me feel relaxed by talking to me and distracting me from what was going to happen. The same nurse also gently injected the needle I needed to place me under anaesthetic. From what I hear, the surgery was very successful, and I awoke feeling a bit groggy, but the staff at the South Hill attended to my every need. I did have one moment that was a bit scary though, and maybe my own small complaint about experience. About an hour after I had woken up from surgery, I suddenly lost all vision, and everything went completely back. I began to panic and scream a bit, and I heard one of the staff let out a deep, long laugh, almost like they were laughing at me. I'm overlooking this though because of how fantastic the rest of the staff were at calming me down. Luckily, my vision did return after maybe a minute or two, and the doctors said they weren't too sure as to what had happened. I didn't really care what happened, the main thing is that I could see again. Since then, I've had no trouble with my eyes, and I fondly remember my experience of South Hill Community Hospital. The review seemed fairly normal, but I was a bit concerned about the doctor who was laughing at the patients, and so I read the response that the hospital gave to this review, which I've also attached. Hello, Redacted. Thank you for your kind words about our hospital. We are glad to hear that you had a mostly excellent experience and that your recovery is going well. In regard to the doctor that laughed at you, we have spoken to other staff that were present at the time, and they have all said that no doctor did laugh, and they were all trying their best to help you. We would never allow a doctor to laugh at a patient, and if it does come out that someone did, then the matter will be dealt with accordingly. Best of luck with your recovery, South Hill Community Hospital, 16th of the 5th, 2017. For some reason that I am unsure of, I decided to look at what other reviews this man had left. I think maybe because of the laughing doctor that the hospital claimed didn't happen, I wanted to see if this reviewer had any other weird experiences elsewhere. This led me down a rabbit hole that I wish I hadn't gone down. The next review is his that I read was for a local restaurant, and I've attached the review and the restaurant's response here. 4-star. I wasn't aware that this was a themed restaurant, but it was a nice surprise. 21st of the 5th, 2017. I booked a table at Redacted for me and my brother to go out and enjoy some Italian food. Unfortunately, my brother had to cancel, and I thought that I would still make the most of my night and still go out for dinner by myself. The staff that greeted me at the door were very friendly, and they showed me to my table and allowed me to choose a glass of wine from a very impressive wine list. I enjoyed my wine, and I ordered my meal, which didn't take long to arrive, which I was very pleased with. I began eating my puttanesca, and it was very delicious, because maybe the best Italian dish I had ever eaten. It was about halfway through my meal when things got a little bit odd. Suddenly, all the lights went off, and the restaurant was left in the dark. At first I thought it was my eyes, long story, but I began to see a dark outline of a figure standing in front of me. The figure was quite tall and appeared to have long fingers that had very long nails at the end of them. The figure took a step towards me and lifted up one of the fingers and pointed its long fingernail towards me. It then let out a loud growling noise when suddenly the lights flicked back on and he was gone. At first, I was shocked as to what had happened, but I soon figured out that this is one of those themed restaurants, and this one must be horror themed. Once I knew that, I began to realize how much I enjoyed the experience, and I feel it definitely added to my nights. My only advice, however, would be to make it clearer that this is horror themed. Some people might not enjoy it as much as me. Dear Redacted, thank you for your review, but we are a bit puzzled. We are not a horror themed restaurant. We are just a small business that specializes in Italian cuisine. At first, after reading your review, I thought maybe you had written the review about a different restaurant and accidentally posted it on our page. I decided to check security footage though, and I think I have managed to spot you, or someone that looks a lot like your profile picture. And I can confirm that no lights went out or that anyone was standing in front of you. I did notice one thing though, and that is, while you were eating, your eyes suddenly rolled back into your head, and you sat motionless for around 30 seconds, before your eyes returned to normal, and you looked puzzled but then continued eating. I hope that everything is okay and that you are alright. Regards, Management at Redacted, 2nd of the 6th, 2017. I was getting more and more concerned about this reviewer at this point, and I continued to read his other reviews, and read his review after that one, and found that he had a similar experience elsewhere. The following is a review he posted about a live show he attended. 3-star. The play was fairly good, but the actors got a bit too close for my liking. 28th of the 5th, 2017. Based on a recent experience at a horror-themed restaurant that gave me a bit of a fun fright, I found that I've become interested in finding something else that can give me a bit of a spook. That's when I found out there was this play being performed at the Silverstone Theatre. As this is near my house, I thought I'd give it a go. I read some other reviews and read that it was supposed to be quite scary and would give everyone a bit of a fright. This sounded like something I would be quite interested in. When the play began, I found myself enjoying it quite a bit. It provided a few good scares and a few good laughs. I found that it did get a bit boring during the middle section, but it's the ending that I have the most issue with. I was sitting there watching the play, enjoying one of the moments that was dark and suspenseful. Suddenly, one of the actors appeared quite close to me. In fact, he was only inches away from my face, and he was staring straight into my eyes. His eyes were the only thing I could see. The rest of his face was still in silhouette, but he must have had some good contact lenses on, because his eyes were a light yellow tinge around the whites of his eyes, and they were dark red in the centre. He then began to laugh a deep, raspy laugh, and I could feel his hot, stinking breath against my face. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he disappeared again. I thought that this was a fairly cheap jump scare that for some reason singled me out. I think it's irresponsible of the production not to warn audience members that the actors may appear so close to them. At the time of posting this, there had been no response from the theatre or the production company that put on the show. I was equal parts worried and curious. I needed to know more about this man and his strange reviews. I then read his next review, and while it was not as eventful as the previous ones, it was still strange. 2-star. The optometrist didn't even try to help me when I came to him for help. 6th of the 6th, 2017. I've been having a strange problem with my eyes in the past 3 days, and so I turned to the optimistic optometrist for help. But help is not something he can provide. When I got there, I told him that for the past few days I felt a weird shaking in my eyes. At first he seemed concerned, which is the reason I'm giving you 2 stars and not 1, and he did begin to run a few tests as to why that would be. After trying a couple of things, he quickly dismissed the idea that my eyes were shaking as being in my head, and he couldn't find any evidence that my eyes were shaking. He was quick to get me out of the door and told me to see a doctor if the problem persists. Well, the problem has persisted. In fact, it's gotten worse. I constantly feel a strong shake from behind my eyes, and I almost feel like something is trying to get out. It's gotten to the point where it's almost unbearable, and thanks to you, I wasn't able to find any comfort. There wasn't any reply to this review from any other users or from the optometrist at the time of posting. I was very concerned for this man now. He appears to have a serious issue, and almost every review seems to involve his eyes. The final review I can find from this user is one for a pawn shop, and the review and the response from the pawn shop may be the most concerning. 1 star. Why advertise that you buy any item when you clearly do not? 8th of the 6th, 2017. I came into your store this morning and tried to sell you an item, but was told to leave and that they would not buy what I had to sell. However, the sign out of your front door, your store reads, "We buy any item." This is clearly not true. I told you that I would happily remove the item from its cases if that made it easier, but this is the moment when I was told to leave. I will not be returning to your store, as it appears you are lying in your advertising. Very disappointed. Can you please remove this review? It reflects very badly on my small business to have a bad review, especially when you don't explain the full story, which is, you came into my store quite distressed and began yelling and begging me to take an item from you. You explained that I wouldn't need to buy it, I could just have it. At first, I thought you were trying to give me an illegal item that you needed to get rid of quickly. This is why I refused at first, but then you continued to explain what the item was. I know the sign out the front of the store says that we buy any item, but I am telling you right now, we will definitely not buy your eyes off of you, even if you do take them out of their cases, as you said. So, again, I would appreciate if you did remove this review. From Redacted. After reading this final review, I was desperate to know more about, but the reviews ended there. He never wrote another one. I then did a bit of detective work and looked at the Facebook page that was attached to his account and managed to find his brother. I then looked up any reviews his brother may have written. I managed to find the only review that his brother had written. I have attached this review and the response here. 3-star. Overall happy with the service, apart from one thing. I recently had to use the services of South Hill Funeral Home for my own brother's funeral. The funeral service that they provided was very touching, and it's what we wanted, and more importantly, it's what my brother would have wanted. Nice words were said, and the place looked lovely. There were nice flowers around the chapel. The funeral was an open casket funeral, as per our request, and this was something that we had been very specific about, and had given the funeral home specific instructions about. This is what my only complaint is about. Given the way my brother died, we asked for his eyes to definitely be closed, but when we viewed the body, what I saw will always haunt me. Him lying there, with his eyelids opened, and the black holes where his eyes used to be, staring up at me. Dear Redacted, I am glad to hear that the service was what your brother would have wanted. I am concerned, however, about your complaint. We made sure to follow all your instructions in regard to preparing the body, and we made sure that his eyes were closed. I do also remember that when I moved his body after the service, his eyes were most definitely firmly closed. I am unsure how they would have been open when you viewed the body, but I profusely apologise for this mistake. Kind regards, Management of South Hill Funeral Home. This review from his brother told me one thing: this man is now dead. This made me need to find out more about his death, and so I trawled through the internet searching for his name, his brother's name, and any of the locations that he wrote reviews for. Eventually, I managed to find one newspaper article from a fairly small local paper that I believe is about this man. I've attached the article here. Local's death may have been mistakenly ruled a suicide. The coroner's report has just been released on the death of a local man. The man in question was found dead in his own apartment. He was found with scratches on his face and with both of his eyes removed from his head, and were instead on the floor in front of him. It was originally believed to be a suicide, but the recent coroner's report has raised more questions than it provided answers. One of those questions is now, was this really a suicide? This is now being brought into question because of two key findings in the report. The first is a small, dark footprint that has been found just in front of where the body was found. The second finding is that it appears that the man may not have removed his own eyes like originally thought, but instead they may have been pushed out of his head from the inside. This is all the information that I am able to find about this mysterious death, and I hope that more information may be uncovered so that there can be some answers, but I doubt it.